Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So as America races towards a repeat of Victorian diseases again, as they strip away vaccine protections, with Florida, the MAGA petri dish, being the first to abolish the vaccine mandate completely, it seems. Nigel Farage invited an anti-vaxxer to persuade the Reform UK conference goers not to use vaccines yesterday. So why are those on the far right who know the anti-vax conspiracy theories are nonsense leaning into it themselves, and what will be the consequences for the rest of us? But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So at the Reform UK conference yesterday, a main hall keynote speaker said that the COVID vaccines were probably responsible for so many members of the royal family getting cancer. Being clear, complete nonsense. Apart from anything else, the cancers that royal members have had recently will have been developing long before COVID. Anyone who understands even the basics of cancer or vaccines could not think that. In fact, just for one moment, let us take a moment to consider how much of a medical boon vaccines are. They'd abolished entire diseases. This is no longer the case, because anti-vax conspiracy theorists have destroyed the essential mass. For vaccines to work across society, you need the vast majority of people to be taking them. I think it's about 95% take-up required for herd immunity. So it doesn't even matter if you can only get a small percentage of gullible people to avoid vaccinations for themselves and their kids. That is enough to screw things up for the country. In both the USA and the UK, we have seen the re-emergence of diseases that had once been eradicated completely because the take-up of vaccines has fallen. Being clear, the overwhelming majority of people in both countries are not stupid and continue to get themselves and their families vaccinated. But that's not enough. Like 90% is not enough. And vaccines, when you think about it, are the one big boon we get from the private pharmaceutical industry. I've often said, along with others, we would be better off if governments funded pharmaceutical research instead of leaving it to the private sector. Why? For the private sector, it's more profitable to treat, manage, rather than cure diseases. That is because if they manage a disease, they get to supply the drugs for that particular patient for life. If you cure it, you can sell one course of treatment, then they're cured. They don't need any more. That's it, done. But governments are the ones who stump up the cash for the treatment. So they are financially incentivized to cure, not just manage. So they should do the research really. But vaccines are a rare case of a pharmaceutical, which means people don't need lifelong treatment. It's actually even better than a cure. It's a preventative. But now the far right have co-opted the anti-vax movement for their own purposes. A few years ago, Reform UK was struggling in the polls. Nigel Farage stepped away from the leadership to focus on broadcasting because the post-Brexit landscape was a struggle for him politically. He no longer had a cause beyond complaining about the weak source Tory Brexit, which he voted for. If the Tories had never given him his small boats lifeline, that would have been him dead and buried. Politically, he'd be stuck on GB News complaining at a camera like me. But at the time, anti-vaxxers were all the rage. All the failing personalities were getting into it because it was easy clickbait. But Reform UK were at least better than that. What changed? Well, we need to see how it unfolded in America to see what's coming for Britain. Vaccines are now a voting bloc. 5 years ago, that line would have sounded like a really bad joke. Today, it's a campaign hook. Same US politicians who rallied against lockdowns now list medical freedom right under Second Amendment, right? And the numbers don't lie. Counties that went hardest for the far right ticket have seen childhood vaccinations rates drop as much as 30% in America. Turns out the vaccine fight was never just about health. It's a political power play. You know, let's have a look. Once you see the playbook, you just spot it in every race on the ballot, right? So remember 2021, you've got anti-vax Facebook groups, right? Mostly kale, smoothie memes, yoga mom Gil, all that sort of stuff. You scroll down the pages now and what you'll see are Proud Boy banners, Cranon drops, live streams from school board hopefuls promising to stop the mandate. Researchers at the University of Washington followed 400 anti-vax accounts for like a year and a half. After the first employer mandates dropped, post-quoting far right, talking points jumped 600%. Same sort of myths, microchips, magnetized arms, but the messengers swapped kombucha for MAGA hats, right? One side brought the suburban moms, the other brought the donor list and the megaphone. And guess who wound up in charge? So why pick vaccines as a campaign strategy? Well, there's three reasons. First, it's quite universal. Like every parent has tackled that school form checklist. So you scare them there, you've grabbed their attention. And that's really good. Getting parents to fear for the safety of their child is very powerful. Then there's trust. So vaccines lean on science, of course, and science needs credibility. If your goal is to completely destroy faith in established wisdom, then poking the easiest civic ritual, which is rolling up your child's sleeve, pays off very quickly. Then third, mandates. You whisper the M word and libertarians reach for their wallets and their votes, right? Stir those things together, you get rallies that start with health freedom and finish with Confederate flags in the rotunda, right? The far right didn't invent the recipe. They just saw the potential and cranked up the heat. You watch any anti-mandate rally reel now in America, and it's basically like, part of it's tearful mother blaming a shot for her kid's eczema. Second one, nurse fired for skipping the jab. Next one, congressional hopeful yelling about medical tyranny, right? By the time the PA starts blasting, we're not going to take it, the crowd's waving their sort of Quran flags and chanting USA. It's not chaos, this is choreography. Investigators tracked one dark money bus tour, same lineup, 8 cities, emails harvested at every stop, of course. One anti-vax non-profit raked in $28 million in small donations last year, which was double their pre-COVID record. It's like protest to mailing list to voter file to turnout machine, rinse and repeat. Then it goes from campaign to policy. Energy is useless unless you can bottle it. So lawmakers then stepped in. Ohio Republicans floated a bill banning all employer vaccine mandates, no carve-outs for hospitals. Florida's Surgeon General now advises that healthy adults under 65 don't need their mRNA boosters, thumbing the nose at the CDC data. In fact, latest last week is that Florida seems to be getting rid of mandates altogether, as far as I can tell. They're just not going to... Vaccines, no, if you want a vaccine, do it yourself. In Congress, there's a bloc that wants to zero out federal vaccine education dollars, calling them propaganda. Starved public health ads and immunisation rates drop. When measles pops up again, the same grifters will point at the outbreak and go, see, government can't protect you. Undermine the fix, highlight the mess, promise to torch the system, loop complete. So you can see the appeal to Farage. He promoted a hard Brexit and got it. The hard Brexit made life worse for people. Now he pretends to be outraged at the falling living standards and claims it's because they didn't get a proper Brexit. Only a proper Brexit will fix it. It has opened up for him a credible route to power for him. People's lives are worse because of him, and he is using it to his advantage. Well, why not try the same trick with vaccines, just like the far right have done in America? Persuade enough people to stop using them. It results in those formerly eradicated diseases coming back. People should see, they've come back because the vaccine rates have fallen. But just as with Brexit, that's not what these people will actually think. They'll think the opposite of logic, and the grifters get to ride a wave of vaccine disinformation to power. For some time, I was a bit baffled by this. Like even Trump was just last week trying to talk up the benefits of vaccinations. He's clearly worried about the actions of his own health secretary, whom he only gave the job to, remember, as part of an election pact, right? Trump has put a lot of people in place in his government because they think the way he wants that department to think. The health department's totally separate. He didn't want RFK Jr. nicking votes off him because it was going to be a tight election. So he had to offer him that job, right, to get him on his side. But Trump doesn't feel he can overrule him now. So he's actually trying to persuade his own supporters not to fall for it. It's not working. But I used to scratch my head at why the far right would attack vaccines in general. They provide an income for private pharmaceutical companies who donate to them. It contributes towards the healthy workforce they need to keep generating their wealth. Perfect for them. They hate spending on healthcare. This means you don't have to. You get a healthy workforce to dig up your billions for you, and you don't have to pay very much for it. But they obviously decided that it's such a strategically powerful device that it's worth taking a little bit of a hit. They couldn't turn it down. Perhaps they don't realise just how much damage this rhetoric can do. And you can apply it to other things as well. I've already drawn a parallel with Brexit. America hasn't had Brexit, right? Well, they may be getting it now. It applies to other policy areas, though, because it's just a principle. If you can blow up consensus on something as basic as preventing very serious diseases, you can torpedo any collective action. Climate rules, food safety inspections, election certification. Vaccines arguably are just a stress test. When every expert is bought and every study is fake, power drifts to whoever yells the loudest. And who can afford the biggest megaphones? Far right. In the stream last night, I said, we should not assume that public opinion on various policy areas now will be the same in 2029. I've seen the polling, which shows just how much transphobic views have taken hold across lots of demographics in Britain in just the last few years. I've seen it go in real time. And it's coincided with heavy pushing of messages in the media. It shows that they can change public views dramatically in just a few years by just shouting a message at people. It goes back to the tell the lie, make it big, keep repeating it, and eventually they'll believe it. Without pushback, public stupidity could be at epidemic levels come the next election. I think Farage sees this. He knows anti-vax conspiracies are nonsense. He wouldn't lean into them a few years ago. Refused. He knows it's not even aligning with Trump because Trump is actually trying to push back a little himself in his weak as piss way. But Farage also sees the enormous strategic potential after the way it's panned out in America. Do not think that the culture wars being fought today in Britain are the extent of our problems. The far right are flooding the zone with way more yet to come. While Keir Starmer was announcing phase 2 of his government to a largely sceptical audience, Nigel Farage is announcing an actually more impactful phase 2 to his own plans to destroy this country. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.